Hello, I'm Helen Cooper, author of The Downstairs Neighbour, which is out now. For my last reading, if you saw it, you might remember that I was in my understairs cupboard for reasons which related to the passage I was reading. This time, you've probably noticed that I'm in my car. That's because I'm going to read a section from the perspective of Chris, the neighbourhood driving instructor who becomes embroiled in the events of the story. He must have travelled this route 1,000 times. Usually in his passenger seat, his feet poised over his extra set of pedals, suburbia conveyor belting past as his student drove excruciatingly slowly. The same tree-lined streets and chained-up bikes, the same cars in the same drives. Today Kingston felt watchful. Almost certainly it was Chris's imagination, his mood, but he'd sensed it from the moment he'd left home several hours before. Neighbours herding their kids into giant Volvos had seemed to blast glances towards his house, but maybe they'd seen the police parked outside the night before and didn't know who they'd been visiting. Even now, Chris seemed to catch the eye of every pedestrian as his student Dylan steered them haphazardly through the streets. He cut the lesson slightly short, needing to gather his thoughts before the next. Shifting into the driver's seat, he flipped down the visor against the low March sun and headed to Chantry High School. Kids of all ages were swarming out of the gates, unleashed for the weekend. Usually he was glad of his car's logo, separating him from the parents in 4x4s, yet assuring everyone he wasn't some weirdo lurking outside a school. But today it made him feel conspicuous. He was glad when he spotted Jess's short legs in black tights weaving towards him. She was rifling through her handbag, checking her phone, oversized sunglasses tobogganing down her nose. Eventually, she looked up and scanned for his car. He waved and moved over into the passenger seat, wondering how many times a week he did this shuffle over, this relinquishing of control. As soon as she got in, he could tell she was upset. She took off her shades and her maroon school blazer, but just sat there staring at her lap. "Jess, you okay?" She nodded, still didn't put on her belt. "Ready to go? Shall we try a reverse park again this lesson?" At last she pulled her seat so far forward that her nose almost touched the wheel, snapped on her belt and set off. Jess was usually a pretty vocal driver, shrieking, "Oh, red light," or "Where's second gear gone?" at regular intervals. She was silent today, though, and when she attempted the reverse park, she ended up jutting out almost perpendicular to the pavement, then clipped the shiny Audi behind. That was the final straw. She threw up her hands and dissolved into tears. "I can't do this." Chris glanced behind to check there was no visible damage to the other car's bumper, praying there was no expensive bill to be covered. "Come on, it's okay. Pull up over there and turn off the engine." She got herself under control and did as he said. They sat for a moment as the car exhaled around them. "What's wrong?" He reached towards her shoulder but thought better of making contact, veering awkwardly away. Jess pressed her fingertips against her cheekbones, leaving oval prints in her makeup. "Haven't you heard?" she said. "Heard? About Freya. Nobody's seen her since yesterday." Freya's image flooded Chris's mind. Her confident posture when she drove. The healthy glow of her skin, which always made him feel flabby and light-deprived. He saw her vividly for a moment, eclipsing Jess as she sat 6 inches taller, shoulders relaxed, blonde ponytail fanned over the headrest. Infuriatingly confident sometimes, like she thought driving was no big deal. "She hasn't turned up," he said.